Hello everyone. Today we have another faction video for Total War Warhammer. But we have went through all of the major factions, so what will we be looking at today? Well, taking a look at the minor faction map released a couple of months ago by CA, I'm going to briefly go over the minor human factions of the old world. As you can see in the list, we have the Vargs, Scalenes, Tilia, Estalia, the Border Princes, and Kislev. Now in this list as well, there are Bretonnian duchies, but I've sort of went over them in the Bretonnian faction video, so you can watch that for more information. I will not be talking about them today. Now, many would consider Kislev a major faction of fantasy, and lore-wise they are, and game-wise they were. They used to have their own army book, but after 6th edition they were removed. So compared to the 15 factions with army books, I consider Kislev minor in my own opinion. Since Kislev has the most information out of these factions, however, I'll go over them last, as I would like to spend some time on them. So first we're going to discuss the Norskins. Starting with the Vargs. The Vargs are a northern Norskin tribe, and considered to be one of the most powerful of the tribes. They are the most twisted in mind and body of all the Norse, and have had to fight hard against horrible beasts to occupy the land they own, such as giants, beastmen, and demons. They have domesticated the gigantic mammoths of their land and often ride them into battle. They solely worship the blood god Khorne. No other gods are worshipped by the Varg. The Vargs are said to have come from distant lands and settled in Norska, led by their greatest and most legendary chieftain, a mighty chaos lord of Khorne known as Hrothgar Daemonax, who led them in conquering land and enslaving weaker tribes. Hrothgar later went deeper into the realms of the gods and ascended to demonhood. The next faction we have are the Scalenes, great sea raiders and considered the most cunning of the Norse. Their lands are the closest to the southern lands, so they are found raiding the imperial province of Nordland often, and even Bretonnia. I can't find much more information on this tribe, but essentially the Scalenes will launch raids on neighboring factions, while the Varg will be more interested in starting a raid and ending it with a bloody invasion. There are many other Norskin tribes that will more than likely be represented in the game as horde factions, but the Vargs and Scalenes are the only tribes shown on the map, so I won't go over the others. From the icy north, we move south, to the lands of more civilized men. Here, the city-states of Tilia and the Estalian kingdoms battle for trade control of the seas bordering their lands. The Tilians are a nation which lack a central government. While sharing a common language and culture, the land has been divided into several city-states. As seen on the map, mountains protect much of Tilia's northern border, but along the coast the land is open to the Estalians and the Border Princes. Tilia has no standing army, and strongly relies on the dogs of war regiments to fight its battles. Many of these mercenaries hail from Tilia itself, but it is common to see dwarfs, ogres, elves, and men from all over the old world amongst the mercenary ranks. Estalia is a rival to the Tilians, as they share religious figures and of course trade in the same sea, so conflict is inevitable between them. Like Tilia, Estalia has much of its borders guarded by mountains, but they do have open areas along the coast leading to Tilia and the south of Bretonnia. Much like Tilia, military affairs are left to mercenaries, usually comprising of heavy cavalry, handgunners, and swordsmen. So if you decide to wage war against these southern factions, be wary that they will be wealthy and will field large amounts of powerful veteran troops. The Border Princes act as a buffer between the Empire and the Badlands. The Borderlands are not inhabited by a set people, as much of the population are refugees and emigrating peasants and nobles seeking a better life from other lands. Many of these men come from the Empire, Bretonnia, and Tilia. Due to such open borders, the Borderlands are of course a natural destination for deserters and criminals as well. Long ago, the Borderlands were inhabited by the Greenskins, much like the Badlands, but now the land is fiercely disputed by human colonists and Greenskin tribes. The colonists have organized themselves into tiny kingdoms, principalities, and city-states, but many are no more than fortified villages. All of these are targets of Greenskins, and few last very long. The cities that do survive, however, vary greatly in size, some with barely 10,000 inhabitants, but others with well in excess of 200,000 and able to muster many thousands of soldiers on the field should the need arise. The northwestern colonists are the most powerful, as the Greenskin threat is much lower there, giving the humans ample time to build their kingdoms and acquire large amounts of men. Many mercenary corps originated from and are still based in the Borderlands. Mercenary work is more common in this region than anywhere else in the Warhammer world, with the exception perhaps of Tilia and Estalia, as few of the Border Prince cities maintain standing armies comparable in size to Bretonnia or the Empire. Usually only several thousand professional soldiers, augmented greatly by peasant levies. The preference is instead to hire mercenary units to fight for limited periods of time, particularly where the conflict involves clashing with their neighbors as border disputes are frequent. Finally, we'll be taking a look at Kislev, the most northernly civilized nation in the old world. It is a large country which separates much of the empire from the Chaos Wastes. The country is in a constant chill due to its location, making food and resources quite scarce. Due to this and just how dangerous the land is, there are only 3 cities in Kislev: Erengrad, Prague, and the capital, Kislev. Kislev is ruled by a warrior sorcerer known as a Tsar, or a Tsarina, and they practice in the unique lore of magic known as ice magic. The current ruler of Kislev is Tsarina Katarin. Long ago, the land known as Kislev was ruled by the nomadic Ungol tribes, who had dominated the land and all other people who lived there. But eventually, a large migration came from the east into Kislev by the people known as the Gospodars. War was inevitable as the Gospodars started laying the foundations of cities in the lands. The superior tactics and weapons of the Gospodars led to the defeat and subjugation of the Ungols. Soon enough, the cities of Kislev, Prague, and Erengrad had been completed, and the peoples of the Ungols and the Gospodars had joined together to form the Kislevites, and they have stayed that way for the past 8 centuries. The land of Kislev is divided between the middle-ranking nobles known as Boyarin, and they are comparable to the dukes and counts of Bretonnia, or even the elector counts of the empire, offering protection to the common folk and raising militias in return for fealty. The boyars are strictly of Gospodar descent. Below them are the military officers known as the Druzina, which act as military leaders for the Kislevites. Kislev may have one of the worst start positions in Total War Warhammer. They border the Chaos Wastes, and as such will more than likely always be the first faction to fall to Chaos, creating a great challenge should they become playable. Now, since there is such a huge chance of Kislev being added as a DLC faction, because they are the most fleshed out of the factions that are considered minor on this list, I do want to take a look at the roster and the units that they had available to them before their army book was taken out of print, essentially. So, first off, for Legendary Lords, we have 2 options. Now, it all depends on if they only want to keep living people or if they'll go back a little bit for a dead person. So, of course, we have Tsarina Katarin, but if they decide to go back a little bit, we can have Tsar Boris. Now, Tsar Boris has a unique mount, and his unique mount is a bear. So, a lot of people, I think, would be interested to see him. And of course, if you guys are interested in reading up more of this stuff, you can of course just type in Warhammer Tsar Boris or Tsarina Katarin. But I think a lot of people would be interested to see Tsar Boris. And no, I'm just going to mention now, the Kislevites don't actually have bear cavalry. That is something that somebody made up for the fan-made codex or army book. That is not officially supported by GW, so it probably will not be in the game. And I'm pretty sure CA have even said on live streams that Kislev will not have bear cavalry, so we'll just say that now. But yeah, those are the 2 legendary lords that I believe they could have. They don't have many other characters other than that anyway. So for lord sections, we have the Boyar, as I mentioned in the little lore piece. They are basically the owners of land in Kislev, so of course they'll be your lords, just like Empire Generals or Vampire Lords in the Vampire Count's army. For heroes, we have the Druzina, which again mentioned are the military commanders, so they're going to be a bit of a champion type agent from the older games, I believe. And they'll, of course, do military training, and they'll be potent fighters on the battlefield. Now, if Kislev were to be added to the game, I do believe that CA would take creative, a bit of a creative license with GW, and maybe create a wizard for this faction. An ice mage would be really fancy, and it would be, of course, something that would be really useful for the Kislevites. But yeah, that's up to GW, I guess, because they did, of course, make a model for Kolek, which is someone that has never received a model in tabletop, so I look forward to seeing if they'll add anything to this faction if they make it playable. So then, that's the characters and lords and stuff out of the way, so we then move on to actual units. So for melee infantry, we have a few units. The Kislevites place less emphasis on ground fighting and thus do not have many types of infantry regiments. Foot troops from Kislev are usually those drafted to fight but do not own horses themselves. Examples of Kislev infantry units include, and it's actually the only 3 units they really have, are the Kossars, which are going to be your first infantry unit. They are light infantry who fight at range with bows and in melee with axes. So these are going to be your early game infantry, and they're going to be probably pretty bad. We then have the Streltsy, which are infantry who fight at range with handguns and in melee with halberds. So these are going to be your middle, a bit better infantry. Of course, halberds are going to be very effective, and handguns are going to be armor piercing. So against the Chaos Warriors that you'll inevitably be fighting, handguns and halberds would be a great combination. We then have the Criminal Guard, the elite infantry who guard the Tsar. They wield halberds and wear heavy armor. So these are going to be your elite infantry, of course. And yeah, so then we move on to cavalry. Kislev armies usually win or lose their battles based on the performance of their mounted regiments. They have access to various light and heavy cavalry units from both Gospodar and Ungul stock. So for melee cavalry, we have winged lancers, and these are the Gospodar knighthood, named after the wings worn on their backs. Now, if you know anything about winged hussars in real history, that's basically exactly what they are. We then have the Griffin Legion, which is an elite regiment of winged lancers who act as the Tsar's elite guard. So if the Tsar takes to a horse instead of foot, he'll be guarded by the Griffin Legion. If he is on foot, he'll be guarded by the Kreml Guard. We then have ranged cavalry, which is the Ungul horse archers. These are swift, light cavalry who excel at outflanking and bowfire. So these are, of course, horse archers. Who doesn't love horse archers in Total War, right? Yeah. For war machines, we then have the war wagon, and this is a horse-drawn cart that carries infantry who fire arrows and black powder weapons from inside. So this is going to be acting a bit like a chariot, and of course people inside are going to be firing weapons and all that stuff, so it's going to be quite interesting. We then have artillery, and artillery are large gunpowder units that are known to be used in the Kislev armies. They are not dissimilar to those used by the Imperial and Dwarf allies, though somewhat more primitive. So they have access to Uragan cannons and mortars. And there's nothing really specific about this. A mortar is a mortar, and the Uragan cannon does not have any pages that I could find specifically. So it's basically just going to be the same as maybe an Imperial Great Cannon, essentially. So yeah, guys, that is the minor human factions of Total War Warhammer. Of course, like I said, there may be more that aren't placed on that map because they're horde factions. One of the CA employees has stated when the map was released that there are extra factions that are hordes that aren't on that map because someone mentioned seeing a orc tribe, but it wasn't on that map. They seen it in a gameplay video, but it wasn't on the map, and someone confirmed that the horde factions are not on that map. So it's going to be quite interesting to see all the extra factions that are hordes. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to leave a like and a comment down below as always. And if you enjoyed this Warhammer series, make sure to let me know because these took a lot of work, these 16 videos. So I hope you really did enjoy them. Based on the likes and views, of course, it does seem like you guys really enjoyed. And Warhammer is just a couple of weeks away, guys. I'm so excited. Hopefully you are all too. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching. I will see you all next time. Goodbye.